Hello, today is Wednesday, October 30th, 2019. This is the Cluster API Office Hours meeting. Cluster API is a subproject of SIG Cluster Lifecycle. Today's meeting is being recorded, and we do have a CNCF code of conduct that we abide by, and we also have meeting etiquette. So please use the raise hand feature in Zoom if you would like to say something, and I'll do my best to notice and call on you. And we also have this agenda document, which I'm sharing. Please add your name to the attending list. And if you have a discussion topic, please feel free to add it to this section, and we will get started. All right, so first up, we have some PSAs. There were new releases in the past week for at least 3 of our providers. So we had a new release of the kubeadm Bootstrap provider, and this was just a minor change, but it did fix an error with some of the init locking that we do to make sure that we don't have 2 control plane machines that try to both run kubeadm init at the same time. We had some series of bug fixes that were in Kappa and CatV. I honestly don't remember exactly what the specific changes were. So Andrew, would you spend just a minute, if you wouldn't mind, going over those?
Yeah, the biggest change is that we migrated to use the out-of-tree cloud provider and the CSI driver.
Awesome, thank you. So strongly encourage anybody who is interested to please give these new versions a try and let us know if you find any issues. All right, next up we have discussion topics. Vince, you have the first one.
Yes, so just with KubeCon and all the festivities coming up, like I know that we're targeting like for early January, but for V1 Alpha 3, and given that KubeCon Europe is in end of March, and we have like a lot of work to do, and the proposal haven't emerged yet, I would like to propose that we kind of move the target date to early March, end of February, possibly. What do you all think about that?
I don't see anybody with their hand up, but I do agree that there's not a lot of development time that is between now and mid-January if you factor in KubeCon and various holidays. So I'm in favor of saying it'll be sometime later than mid-January.
Yep, and another note is like this will also help us like kind of shape out more details, like feedback that we received on the proposal, so that we have more time to kind of like target like a more complete release and not rush things out. So,
any other comments on this topic? Tim.
I would just like to emphasize that we should focus on a feature release or completeness more so than a time box. So if that means pushing the date, I'm wholeheartedly in support of making it more complete. So that way we have part of the feedback we got from our face-to-face was that our release and our documentation was not necessarily complete. So.
All right. Ashish.
On not specifically on this topic, but on the current releases, the PSAs, are the cap PK and the cap D release post cutting over to the merge to the upstream branch, or is it like the last release from the old repos?
No, they're still from the old repositories. So anything that's in the cabpk 0.1.x stream and anything that's in the capd 0.2.x stream comes from the old repositories. We will switch to new minor versions if needed for these two, and those would come from the Cluster API repository going forward.
Okay, and then I assume the version numbers for CAPI releases from CAPI will be the same across for everything, right?
Do you mean
Like the Bootstrap provider will be at the same version as the CAPI or the release artifacts from CAPI.
Chuck and Vince, remind me what we had decided there.
It is no longer its own thing. It got merged into CAPI.
Okay,
So it
right.
is on the same release
At least for
version
the
as CAPI.
at least for the KubeADM Bootstrap provider. CapD, I think, were you still going to do that separately?
That will be an independent module, yes. So that'll have its own version.
Okay, so when we get around to doing V1 Alpha 3 as a release, or if you work off the master branch of Cluster API right now, the KubeADM Bootstrap reconciler controller, whatever you want to call it, does run as part of the CAPI manager. So, so yes, what Chuck said, it'll be co-released. Just it'll be a single release.
Okay.
The CRDs are also going to be core CAPI components. So we don't like publish the Bootstrap components anymore for CAPI-K, but we can if there is like an ask for that to keep it separate.
I think it's okay for now unless like there is another Bootstrap provider that comes up. Till then, it should be fine. The other question that I had was, I saw really an issue for the CAPD release. And I didn't see one for the CAPPK release in the upstream repository in the CAPI repo. So do we want to create an issue for managing releases of CAPPK?
No, because they'll be released with Cluster API. It'll be a single release of Cluster API that'll include the KubeADM Bootstrapper for V1 Alpha 3 going forward. We already have a release process for the KubeADM Bootstrap provider for V1 Alpha 2, which is the 0.1.x release stream, and that's using the separate repository.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
So I had made a note here that we were going to check on with Moshe on the load balancer provider prototyping. So Moshe, do you have any updates on that?
I'm afraid I don't at the moment. I know that I'm going to be doing one for NSXT. It's just a question of whether that's going to be out in the open using public infrastructure, which maybe you can help with, is getting NSXT environments available, or privately on private infrastructure. But I will be doing an NSXT load balancer implementation.
Okay. I do have a section down here below when we get to the control plane proposal to talk about load balancers in more detail, but I think we can wait for that. Thank you for the update, Moshe. Ashish, I see your hand is up. Do you have a question or just didn't take
No, I didn't take down myself.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, sometimes Zoom clears it, sometimes it doesn't. Jason, you have the next couple items.
Before I go, there's a question from Spencer in chat.
Oh, I missed that. Thank you. Was the question, should we publish Cluster API without the KubeADM Bootstrapper? If so, I'd love for us to publish without it if possible, or do two options with and without.
Yeah, sorry, I missed a little bit of the context, but right when I showed up, it sounded like you guys are talking about publishing the kind of full provider components, I guess, with Cluster or KubeADM Bootstrapper kind of built in there, right?
Yes.
Is there a way to publish without that too?
I mean, so you could either take the YAML that we produce and rip out the KubeADM Bootstrapper part, or we could discuss trying not to do that, but I know Tim is going to tell me to be quiet, so Tim, go ahead.
No, I think having two incantations of the YAML seems totally fine. Like,
okay.
I do think from the YAML perspective, we should have batteries included but swappable. Here's the batteries included. and or maybe even have it in a templated style format
Mhm.
with the default template already provided. Right, so that way it's easy to override. So if people use customize, they can just override the customize integration.
That seems reasonable to me.
Yeah, and that seems reasonable to me too. I think as long as I've got some way to rip it out of there that's pretty easy, that's totally fine.
All right, so we should file an issue for that. But Jason, then Vince.
I was just going to say it might take more than just conditionalizing the YAML because the controllers are going to try to spin up as part of the manager. We might have to expose some type of a flag to disable particular controllers.
That's true. Vince?
Same as Bob. Yeah, like we might need an issue for this, but I just wanted to point out that it's not just the YAML. Yeah, same.
Spencer, would you be willing to create a GitHub issue so we can keep track of this?
Sure, absolutely.
Awesome.
That's just to the CAPI repo, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Okay, back to you, Jason.
Okay, all right, let's see. The first one, periodic and post-submit testing status and notifications group. So we've been doing a lot of work, thanks to the work that DIMS has been doing, and I've been working on some stuff with the AWS provider, trying to harden up our EDE testing strategy through periodic and post-submit testing. We got those in a pretty good state. We're dealing with some issues with cleaning up some of the accounts with the janitor right now that we're working through. But as part of this, we also created a notifications mailing list so that we can start alerting people when there are failures with these periodic and post-submit jobs that we care about. So if you are interested in joining this group, please let me know and I will make sure to get you added. We opted against using the SIG cluster lifecycle mailing list because right now these jobs are much noisier than the current kind jobs that and kubeadm jobs that are out there today. So we didn't want to bombard the list, but we have a nice little mailing list to that we can get people subscribed to if you care about the failures and want to help remediate those. Any questions there before I go on to the next topic? All right, so the other topic I had is related to the cluster autoscaler integration. There was some activity recently on the PR to the autoscaler. Right now it's targeting V1 Alpha 1, but there has been some new discussion that they may potentially try to modify what's out there today to be able to just target arbitrary versions of cluster API resources rather than hard coding to V1 Alpha 1. I basically am raising this because I express concern that if they do currently target V1 Alpha 1, there would be no community support for anybody who wants to kick the tires, give it a spin, and potentially runs into issues. Whereas if there's integration with at least V1 Alpha 2 or ideally independent of the group version kind, then we would actually be able to offer some support for users.
One, we'd never offer support. Let's just be clear about that. For an alpha version, we will file issues and we will address bugs for sure. But it's a community offering, so support is a question mark.
Well, right, yeah. What I meant though is there's no way. I mean, if somebody filed an issue against V1 Alpha 1 right now, unless we had somebody who signs
I get what you're saying.
Actually support it, it'll be closed, won't fix.
I get what you're saying. It's just a choice of words. It's kind of out of our scope, but I think we can talk with them. But I don't. It's up to them to decide. Honestly, we can offer advice and insight, but ultimately at the end of the day, they're in control of that code, not us. So I think offering feedback on the PR seems totally like the right idea to do. And potential suggestions like decoupling. We do decoupling in a couple of different ways. And we've done it even in our own code base, even though it makes me cringe. But there's a couple ways to do that. So that also seems prudent. But ultimately, it's up to them to choose. I don't know. I know that the Red Hat folks are very interested in that.
Yeah, Michael's got his hand up.
Yeah, so hopefully Michael can have a comment there.
Yeah. Obviously, OpenShift, we care about this. So getting it merged in some form or the other, whether it's V1 Alpha 2, V1 Alpha 1, or I want to say Andrew McDermott, who's been working on this for us on the cluster autoscaler side internally, has come up with a way to make it not tied to any specific version. But I would like to see it merged sooner than later. That's why I said previously, merge it in some form, and then we can work on it together. So if the current form of the cluster autoscaler patch is mergeable to the cluster autoscaler folks, I think we merge it. And then we have a starting point that we can all collaborate from. That's my suggestion.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, like Tim said, they're the approvers of cluster autoscaler are in charge of approving and merging those PRs. So I don't think there's anything we're going to do to stop them, nor should we. And if they run into the cluster API v1 alpha 1 issues, then we basically tell them you got to upgrade to alpha 2 to get any fixes.
Yeah, and I think the reason why I brought this up here is seeing if there's anybody, if we can try to track down somebody to assign any issues that may come in related to it. That way we're not just, closing won't fix on people.
Yeah, you could definitely assign them to me.
Okay, great.
Sold. Tim, your hand's still up. You got anything else or lingering? Okay.
Nope.
Any other comments on cluster autoscaler integration? All right. Alberto, you have the next topic here.
Hey, Andy, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I just wanted to raise awareness here that we are working on adding immutability support for the CRDs. So hopefully everyone sees this as a benefit and Cluster API can take advantage of this in the near future.
Think there was some discussion about minimum Kubernetes version, right? Because this isn't even in a Kubernetes release yet, is it?
Yeah, I believe this is targeting 1.17 for alpha support.
Okay. Yeah, so I think with this one, based on the discussion that was in the issue, that we need to look at the versions that we're going, the Kubernetes versions that we expect to support for management clusters, and then if we're supporting older versions before 1.17 or whenever this lands, then we'll need validating webhooks until the minimum version of Kubernetes that we're using is one that has the field immutability markers. Michael, I see your hands up. Is it still up from before or? Okay, thank you. Zoom's being weird today. Any other feedback on this topic? All right, Michael, drain enhancements.
So last week I brought this up, some refactoring of the kube control drain library. It's gone through in a couple other patch sets to enhance it. And so I participated in their weekly meeting last week. So basically, just some other small things I'd like to see get done. They're really more nice to haves. That would help, I think, support different use cases. And so just linked to, they asked me to start a mailing list thread. I linked to that, and I also linked to the particular issue. So that's there. People can review and comment on if that's something you're interested in.
Cool. Thank you. Any feedback, anybody? All right, let's go on to status of the proposals. So machine pool, either Wan Lee or Cecile, do y'all have an ETA for doing the pull request for the CAP for that?
Hey, Wan Lee, are you on the call?
I didn't see him.
I guess he's not. So I know that he has a pull request open for POC, and he was planning on opening the pull request with the proposal. I'll remind him about that. He should have done it, but if it's not there, he probably forgot.
Okay, thank you. Testing proposal, Chuck, where are we with that?
That was waiting to get approved. I don't know if it got approved. I was not paying attention. So
I've seen multiple approvals come through.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see.
Might just be waiting for a squash. I think we're just waiting for Andrew, it looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I think, given, well, Jonas is out the rest of this week, but it would probably be nice for anybody who has added comments to give approval. So Andrew and Ashish and anybody else listed in here. I think we probably should update the reviewers in the markdown file to match what's listed, or to at least add the people that are missing from there.
I can do that.
And then
I'll do that and then squash the commits, and then we can get this thing merged.
Okay, thank you. And what's next? Control plane. Jason, can you give a quick summary, and then we'll talk about the load balancer topic?
Yep, definitely. So we went through, and I believe we've addressed the majority of the feedback, with the exception of handling of providers that don't have requirements of load balancers today. So if you get a chance, please do another run through of the doc and provide any last minute feedback that you may have.
Thanks. So the thing about the load balancers that I did want to mention, so hopefully it'll give some more context if you haven't been following along. Some providers, particularly the ones that are cloud-based, so AWS, Azure, GCP, for example, have load balancing as an API and a feature that's available. And then other providers like CapV or other non-cloud providers will most likely or potentially not have load balancers. And so I know that CapV, for example, doesn't require a load balancer and does some creative manipulation of the API endpoints in the cluster based on the individual machine IP addresses. And what we would potentially like to propose is that having some stable API server, either DNS name or IP address, would be a prerequisite to use the new KubeADM control plane type and functionality. And that stable DNS name could come from the cloud provider. So it could do something similar to what say Kappa is doing today, or we could have some sort of external thing that you set up DNS yourself, or you use Route 53 or whatever you're using to get DNS and a load balancer put together, and then we potentially take what Moshe has started for a load balancer provider proposal and proceed with that. But what I'd like to see us think about, at least in the short term, is the way the proposal is written. If you don't specify a control plane ref on your cluster, then all of the existing functionality, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jason, I believe all the existing functionality that we have in Alpha 2 today would continue to function. So you could still have individual and multiple machines for control planes. The kubeadm config secret and the CA cert and key and the etcd CA cert and key and the service account key pair would all continue to be generated in the exact same fashion that they are for V1 Alpha 2. And if you opt into using the kubeadm control plane for V1 Alpha 3, you must bring your own stable DNS name, and the control plane upgrades and management will work. If you decide to go machine-based, there's no regression, because everything that currently works in Alpha 2 would continue to work in Alpha 3. And if we can get the community's approval, I would love to see us approve the control plane proposal as it stands today, given that there is no regression in behavior, and simultaneously work on fleshing out the prototypes for load balancer providers and see if we can find a way to have basically a win-win where for infrastructure providers that don't have load balancers, that we can find a way to get them for them, essentially.
Yeah, the idea was definitely to retain the previous workflows, at least for some period of transition, so we can determine exactly how long we need to maintain that behavior, because I think longer term we're not going to want to maintain those two different parallel support tracks. But I don't see any issue doing it for the V1 Alpha 3 cycle, and potentially another cycle after that if we need to retain that compatibility for some reason. And I see Daniel has his hand up.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I think I tuned out for a second. Why does there need to be a stable DNS name as opposed to, for example, a stable IP that could potentially be provided, through a VIP, through using something like Keep Alive D? That's kind of a common common approach.
I assume that a stable IP would work as well. It just needs to be a stable endpoint, whether it's DNS or IP. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong that an IP wouldn't work. But the issue is that let's say that you have a one machine control plane to start off with, and you generate your certificates for the API server using that machine's IP address, and it's not a stable thing. It's not a VIP, it's not a DNS name. So now you create a second control plane machine because you're trying to do a rolling upgrade, and your kube config secret points at the original machine's IP address. Your API server cert only has the IP address of the original machine, and so this second machine basically can't join the cluster, or it can't fully work. So so we need a stable endpoint that can work across multiple machines as they rotate in and out.
Absolutely agree, and thank you for restating the problem very clearly. One follow-up question. I think Jason, you and I think we briefly maybe talked about this in Slack, kind of the same topic. Does anything need to change in the code? As far as I understand, I don't think anything does. I think we just need to call it out in the documentation, maybe make it clear in the proposal, like this is an implicit requirement, or are we talking about some kind of change to the codes, is some kind of change in enforcing this, doing some kind of pre-flight check? Just wanted to make sure.
So we've already updated the proposal in part of the goals, stating that the requirement is that there is some type of stable API endpoint. The question is how do we sit there and help those providers that don't have that, solve that problem? And it could very well be done through documentation, but I think there is a hope that there would be a much more automated fashion. I'm not expecting there to be additional changes needed to the code right now as far as the control plane proposal. However, as we continue to investigate what this, load balancer support may look like, that may potentially necessitate some changes, and we can, adjust to those as we need to.
I guess the point that I want to bring up is that because there are, I think in practice, many different ways of providing a stable endpoint, that I hope we don't block, ways that haven't occurred to us yet. So as long as the requirement is clear, and as long as we can provide some information when we don't find a stable endpoint, that would be great. But yeah, hopefully we don't block potential like creative solutions for providing that.
Yeah, I think the goal here is to help find the batteries included approach, but we wouldn't want to block additional solutions similar to how we're doing the bootstrapping and that sort of thing.
Vince, you've had your hand up for a little while.
Yeah, I was just wanted to point out that this was actually one of the driving factors and reasons to push out the release for completeness for V1 Alpha 3. I think this might require a little bit more time to flesh out, and the proposal as it stands today, it's actually pretty complete for control plane management. It doesn't address this particular issue, but so the same thing for multi-AZ support, for example, in failure domains, and we kind of spun off that into a different issue. So I would like that for that to happen here as well, so that we can start actually writing some code for the control plane.
Thanks for bringing up the multi-failure domain or whatever you want to call it thing, Vince. If y'all haven't seen it yet, we do have an issue that, where did that go? 1647. So this is an addendum or a proposed addendum to the control plane proposal. So if you haven't had a chance to take a look at this, please do so, because we would ideally like to get the control plane proposal approved, merged, start coding on it, and resolve this and include it as part of V1 Alpha 3 if possible. Moshe, you had your hand up. Did we resolve your thing over chat?
Yep, I'm pretty happy with the control plane proposal and the requirement for a fixed endpoint. I don't think there's really an alternative.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Andrew.
So are we also, are there any assumptions right now around if changes to the machine image is expected or not? Are we essentially saying if you need to change your machine image to have a keep alive daemon or something to make the VIP work, is that okay? Is that up for the user to do, or are we saying that we're only open to implementations that don't require changes to the machine image?
Thinking. I would say and this is off the cuff, if you can predefine a stable API server endpoint, and that happens to be managed in the control plane machines with Keep Alive D or some other VIP manager, then in theory it should work, but there may be some problems around removing the individual machines from the load balancer, or from receiving traffic as you're trying to rotate them out. So I think it would be worth exploring that in more detail. I don't think we can solve that right now.
So I also think one of the challenges here would be is that there's going to be limitations in a lot of the cloud provider environments that wouldn't allow this to work. So that, I think if there is or isn't some type of image requirements, it may be related more to infrastructure provider implementations and less as a generic requirement across the board.
Andrew, are you interested in exploring what that might look like together?
Sure. Yeah, I was mainly asking in case we've already considered it, but it sounds like we haven't. So yeah, I can work with Moshe or whoever else is working on this and see what it would take to implement a load balancer that would require like other daemons or changes to machine image. That sounds good. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on anything related to the control plane proposal before we move on? All right, we have a node remediation proposal. Alberto, I think this was you who put this in here. Do you want to give an update on this?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, we just put this PR app with machine health checking or node remediation proposal. This basically propose a new CRD and a best effort to make sure that nodes that go unhealthy are remediated automatically. So as a user, I'm not paying for useless instances without even notice it. So yeah, just looking forward to get feedback on that PR.
Awesome. Thank you for opening this up. I myself have not had time to take a look at it yet, but I know some others have. So like Alberto said, please take a look and add comments. All right, Fabrizio, where do things stand on the cluster cuddle redesign proposal? Are we close to getting all the comments resolved?
I think all the comments are resolved. The comment are squashed. So in my opinion, it is ready to go.
All right, let me just take one quick look here. Come on, GitHub. All right, so I would like to try and solicit approvals from the people who have added GitHub reviews. So if you wouldn't mind, if you haven't already done so, update the list of reviewers to include the people that are listed here in GitHub, and let's reach out and see if we can get approvals from them as well.
Okay, I will update the list.
Great, thank you. Vince, do you have any final comments just on your expectations around timing for trying to get some of these things wrapped up?
I mean, first thing I would love for proposals to kind of get approved and merged this week if possible. I know we have a new one that just came today, so that's probably a little early. But yeah, cluster cuddle redesign and the testing seems all ready to go because if we can get approvals relatively quickly. But yeah, if we can set up time frame for a maximum next week, if we don't get the approvals in, to just merge them at that point, that would be great.
That sounds fair to me. A 1 week lazy consensus timeout from today, at least on testing and cluster cuddle. All right. Any other discussion topics before I move on to looking at the backlog and open issues. All right, well, let's take a look at the CAPI issues. We have 4 that don't have milestones. So the first one, I know we talked about this last week, where we were waiting for some more evidence. I think this was about having Cluster API take care of doing things like, you know, setting up CNI plugins and storage and whatnot. So there was some discussion about trying to do this with add-on management. So I don't know. My gut feeling is to close this, but I don't know, Tim or Jason or anybody else, do you have any ideas?
Maybe this could be docs, but that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I feel like this is the type of issue that's going to be open for months, and then the bot will close it, and then we may freeze it or reopen it, and then ultimately, like in half a year, we'll just close it. That's my gut feeling. Ashish?
So I think this, when we started Cluster API, we said we will only deal with basic, creating a basic Kubernetes cluster, and this kind of makes it out of scope from that perspective. That's just my 2 cents. Like the storage and the networking options are kind of out of scope of core Cluster API.
I would agree with that, especially given that there's the add-on management group that is trying to manage add-ons. So
I would say either close it or point that, like, I mean, we do have CNI, for example, in the quick start. So like we have some of this. We don't have all the other bells and whistles like around it, but yeah, either close it or maybe we can expand the quick start if needed, but I don't think so.
All right. So would either Vince or Daniel, since I saw you +1, mind commenting this is out of scope and closing?
Yeah, I can take care of it.
All right, thank you. Next up, we have a Bootstrap provider define the usage of custom CAs. This is a docs one, and somebody is working on it. So we'll stick this in 0.3 for now, and priority wise, I would say important soon. Okay. And can't sign. All right. Next, we have default secret for the kubeconfig. After cluster creation, should have a unique Kubernetes admin user. So if we create 100 clusters and we get 100 kubeconfig secrets, they all have the same username in the kubeconfig. And this is a request to use a unique username so that if you use a tool that flattens multiple kubeconfigs into a single kubeconfig, that the users don't stomp on each other. So seems reasonable to me. I think with this end, this wouldn't be a breaking change. It would just be the next time we generate a new kubeconfig, it would have a different username than before, right?
Yeah, that's right. That is surprising that tools clobber the usernames like that, but maybe also not surprising.
Well, I think this is probably help wanted, good first issue. I'm okay putting it in the milestone and bumping it out if it misses it.
Yeah, long-term important for priority.
Thanks. Okay.
I thought the user was determined by kubeadm. Is that not the case?
We generate the kubeconfig in Cluster API, and we generate a client cert for it as well. So I think it's up to us, right, Chuck?
Oof, I'd have to double check exactly where that happens or what exactly needs to be set. But
yeah, Fabrizio says it's generated by Cluster API. So yeah, we're in charge.
Okay, cool.
And the last one that's open.
Oh yeah, I opened this one today.
Better Darwin.
This is a long-standing issue with CapD. I would like to put this in the milestone as important soon.
Okay. Do you want help on this one, or?
No, I think we're all right.
We're good? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, and then I don't know if it's worth going through. Actually, before I do that, I did want to mention that there are several issues that have been opened within the past week or so that have things like add a waiting or a not ready phase for machines when a node isn't ready, support updating infrastructure ready on the cluster, an umbrella about states, transitions, and conditions, renaming error reason and error message to failure reason and failure message. I think these we haven't necessarily gone over in the meeting because we tended to just the reporters were assigning milestones to them, but I would encourage y'all to take a look at the list of open issues, especially the ones that are in the 0.3 milestone, and please provide feedback. We need your feedback so that we're not just operating in a vacuum, especially if we're renaming fields, although we will have conversion webhooks to do the translations between Alpha 2 and Alpha 3. So just a PSA to please go take a look at what's out there and add comments if you have opinions. And then in terms of PRs, we have, double check again, yeah, 13 open. Let me get the proposals out of here. So we have, I need to check in with Andrew again. I know he's dealing with something right now, so see if we can get this document updated. I think I need to go through and do some reviews on things, but if you have a PR that's in this list and it's not getting attention, please let us know and we will do our best to review and get stuff moving forward. All right, anything else before we call it a day? All right, thank you, everybody.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, like, I see a lot of new names in the meeting, so I just want to welcome you all to Cluster API, and hopefully we'll see more contributors going forward.
Yeah, thank you, Vince. I will echo that. And again, I really encourage you all to take a look at the open issues and pull requests. If you are new to Cluster API and things are confusing, file issues. We know our documentation can use some improvements. So if you are running through the quick start and you can't figure something out, if you're looking at the code and you can't figure something out, if you read any of the other docs and they need improvements, file issues, open PRs, we really want to try and improve here. So we welcome any and all feedback. So thanks. And I will post the link to this recording as soon as I've got it uploaded. Have a good Wednesday, everybody.